Welcome back to the Leadership Blueprint and Growth podcast. Today's guest is Alyssa Dver, founder of the American Confidence Institute and the ERG Leadership Alliance. She's a two-time TEDx speaker, author of 8 books, and has delivered over 1,000 presentations to organizations like Amazon, the U.S. Army, Yale, and the World Bank. Alyssa blends neuroscience and leadership to teach a powerful truth. Confidence isn't a personality trait. It's a skill. And today we're breaking down how leaders can build it intentionally. Welcome to the show, Alyssa Dver. Alyssa, you describe confidence as a skill and not a personality trait. What was the moment in your personal life that made that truth impossible to ignore?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on here. And thank you for hitting me with a hard question right off the top because it really cues up probably everything that we're going to talk about today. And it was that moment when my son had been diagnosed with a very serious neurological condition. His arms were shaking uncontrollably and nobody knew why. And I was going to these supposedly very credentialed, not supposedly, they were very credentialed doctors, neurologists, neuroscientists, medical doctors, you name it. And I'd look at their fancy credentials behind their head on their wall, and they would look at me and give me some answer that I could just tell from the way they were saying it. And I'd looked in their eyes. They weren't confident, but they felt like they had to say something. And we were trying all these different things, just short of torturing my child. Actually, I would say it was actual torture because when you are injecting Botox into deep muscle tissue, which is one thing they did, yeah, we had to give him medication to calm him down, and then I had to take some because it was so stressful. Other medications were going in him, and after a while, when you see that look on somebody's face, even though they're an authority, even though they have those credentials, you start to wonder, what's really going on here? So I started to really dig around, not only brain science to understand that, but really to help my son. Because at that point, I was like, I don't believe them, and I need to do something that will help my child and help me get through this. So that was really a big part of it. The other piece of it, in the same breath, I was watching my son Zach play tennis one day, and he had been learning to play tennis since he was very young. He loved the sport. And when his arms were not shaking on the court, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And when I would come back and talk to those same doctors, they couldn't explain why. But again, would give me some kind of a blah, 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 blah with that look in their face, like, I am totally making this up, And I just said, Jordan, you know what? I got to figure some of this out on my own as a mom, as a professional, as a leader, and really understand like what's going on. So I would say that was like the moment.
With that experience happening earlier in life, how did that reshape the way you think about leaders or people with authority and to give advice under that pressure?
Well, that was pressure for sure, right? Your kid's well-being and your own parenting and all that. But I mean, pressure could be you have to deliver a certain amount of sales, or you have to deliver on deadline, or whatever it is in the work environment, right? And I think a lot of people believe that if you have a title, like vice president or senior vice president or CEO, whatever that title is, it earns you confidence. And it doesn't. In fact, it often does the opposite. People have this imposter syndrome, they have all kinds of other issues. And once people get to that seat, that title, then sometimes they act like the opposite of confident, right? They act dictatorial, or they act in a way that is just certainly doesn't convey confidence to other people. So, for me, the biggest lesson was you don't just get it. It doesn't drop out of the sky on your head, confidence. It's not something that somebody else can actually give to you either. And it's not something you're born with. But you can learn to be confident, and you don't need a title or even a lot of experience to get it.
Gotcha. Thank you. Now, many leaders believe confidence means certainty. From a brain science or neuroscience perspective, what does real confidence actually look like in the nervous system?
Yeah, well, the definition of confidence is certainty. So, like, you look it up in the dictionary, that's what you're going to find out. But certainty is an interesting phrase because certainty in the real world, whether you're in a laboratory or we're talking about self-confidence, certainty is never 100% absolute. Certainty in a lab, for example, you're going to always have what they call standard deviation of possible, maybe this is not really true. So we do an experiment, we do it 1,000 times, and out of 1,000 times, 800 of those times, yep, it came out the way we expected it. Therefore, this is true. If we do this, we get that result. But the 20% we're going to just say are just outliers, anomalies. And so certainty, first and foremost, it's not all the time. It's going to depend on a lot of things, variables that you may or may not be able to control. So you'll never have 100% certainty. And I want to be very clear that the dictionary is actually wrong. It should be certain enough. Now, with that qualification in the neuroscience realm, certain enough means when something hits your amygdala, and then the amygdala is a part of your brain that is very small, but it's very mighty because it's looking for danger in the environment to keep you safe. So, danger could be physical danger, somebody's about to hit you or run you over, but it's also emotional danger. Somebody is about to maybe hurt your ego a little bit, or maybe you're about to do something that you could look like a fool or fail. Or maybe it's scrolling down on Instagram and going, boy, my life sucks compared to all my friends, right? So, lots of different ways the amygdala gets triggered emotionally. And in that moment, what I call the amygdala moment, if you're not paying attention, the natural pathway for that to send that warning is down into the brainstem. And the brainstem, which is a very big, powerful, very evolved, it's the most evolved part of our brain, its job is to keep us alive in survival mode, fight or flight, so to speak. So if all of a sudden we believe those things to be true, that my life sucks and this guy's out to get me and I can never do that presentation or project that I'm being asked to do, if I believe those to be true and send that down into my brainstem, I'm going to act a little bit like a cave person. I'm going to either be very defensive and aggressive, right? Maybe in a meeting, it looks like I didn't say that. That was not my fault. Right? Those kinds of behaviors. Or it might be what seems to be opposite, but it's also survival is getting very quiet and shy and not saying anything at all.
Mm.
So that's option number one for the amygdala. But option number two, again, when you're build the skill to recognize that something is coming in that might be emotionally a little uncomfortable, you say, wait, time out. I'm going to send it up into my prefrontal cortex, which basically means instead of reacting to that and letting my brainstem, take over, I'm actually going to think about this and think about it in a way that I can rationalize it. And you can only be rational in this part of your brain. I'm pointing to my prefrontal cortex, which is right behind your forehead, vortex.
Okay.
Right? And so that part of your brain helps you think through things. It lets you calculate and correlate. It lets you really make decisions. And that moment of me think it through, let me figure out what's true, let me figure out what's aligned with who I am and what I want to do. That's where confidence is. That's the confident moment. And even knowing you may be wrong, I may be in that 20% deviation at this moment, I may fail. I'm okay with that. I'm certain enough.
You work with organizations like Amazon, the US Army, and the World Bank. What's one confidence myth that shows up everywhere, regardless of industry or seniority?
Oh gosh, I got a long list of these, Jordan. But the first one that you asked me, just the one off the top, is that extroverts are typically not confident
Interesting.
and introverts typically are. And the reason I say that is we're talking about leadership. If I were to quiz you on what makes a really confident person, not an extrovert, but a confident person, you probably would say what? You would say,
What ma-
no, I was going to say, go for it. Please tell me.
what makes someone confident?
Well,
Their ability to
describe
speak.
describe somebody that's confident for me. Like what kind of adjectives?
I would say they trust themselves. They speak with authority. They someone that's confident. Yeah, I would say those two. They
Yeah,
speak with authority. Then they trust themselves.
they trust themselves. They listen to other people, right?
Sure.
They're not frenetic. They're not all, "Oh, let's go," right? They're kind of this calm,
Cool.
grounding
Mhm.
personality. Now, that describes an introvert much more than an extrovert. So for a leadership, when you look at leadership capabilities and competencies, they very much align with confident people, but they align more with introvert personality traits than they do extrovert.
That's very interesting. When I was studying hypnotherapy a while back, we discovered there's two types, of course, with this institute, kind of two types of personalities. There's physicals and there's emotionals, and it has nothing to do with how you might think it would be. But physicals, so it's kind of what I am, and we are loud and obnoxious and super hoorah because we are deeply insecure. And the emotionals, the quiet ones, the cool, calm, collected, grounded ones, they tend, and this is just from, the institute's perspective, they kind of, it's viewed as confident, but at the same time, they're a little bit insecure, which is why they're softer spoken or not as loud and boisterous as one might say. And it's just interesting because like opposites attract, right? So we as physicals think that emotionals are really confident because they're calm, cool, collected, and emotionals think that we're physicals are confident because we're loud, hoo-ha, talking to everyone, etc. But really, both of us might be a little
Right,
insecure.
and look, you can be an extrovert and be confident, you can be an introvert and not be confident. I'm generalizing here, but there's this
Right.
default assumption that if people are extroverts, they're confident. I'm like, "No, that's not true. It's not true at all," and there's some data to give to you. There's a corollary, but it's really the number 2 on the list, which is you can't fake it till you make it. And I think that's part of this is that when you're an extrovert, you may try and fake that confidence through the verbosity, right? Like, "Woo," and all the boisterousness, but people know it and you know it, you as the
Yes.
person. So, the fake it till you make it, not a chance.
That's very interesting. Thank you for bringing that up. And I think we spoke on our conversation earlier that the way to cultivate and to build confidence is you first must utilize the confidence you have now in order for it to grow. Can you elaborate on that matter for us?
Well, people also assume that if I do X, if I get the promotion, if I get the title, if I get my PhD, whatever it is, I will be confident. And then they get there and they're like, what happened? Right.
Mm,
Or I'm going to work really, really hard. I'm just going to put my nose to the grindstone. And because I'm working hard, it's going to make me confident. And then at the end of that, they're like, well, that was a lot of energy and a big waste of time. Right. So there's a lot of these perceptions that you're going to get confident once you do X. And that's not true. You need to start in a confident place where you say, I know I can at least aim for that title and promotion and I can find out what's needed to get there. Is there a chance I might not get? I might not get. Sure. That doesn't make me not confident. It just means that I'm being realistic. And at the same time, I'm going to be confident or certain enough to give it a go. If I look at that and I go, you know what? I'm really not prepared to do what I'm not prepared to ask for the raise. I'm not prepared to do the presentation. I'm not prepared for whatever. And you say to yourself, I need some more time. It means that I'm not certain enough to go for it, but I'm certain enough that I need to do some more work to get there.
mm.
So again, it is, there's a lot of the language here is really confusing, but the confidence that you have that there's something you really want to do and something that you really want to be has to be in place for you to get there in the first place. If you get there by luck, it's not going to give you confidence. You're always going to feel like, oh, I didn't really deserve this, right? So if there's something that really is important to you, whatever it is, to get, to be, to accomplish, you got to find that place and a way to say to your brain, have your brain convince itself, I can do this. It may take a long time. It may take a lot of effort. It may make me uncomfortable, but I really want to get this or do this. And subsequently, I believe I can.
Back when you were working with clients one-on-one or even organizations, what was like the framework or philosophies that you would try to instill in your clients or group for someone who maybe was a bit insecure, someone who could increase their confidence? How would you walk them through cultivating that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of schools of thought and institutes, of course, that would have a very different approach. So this is only one approach to kind of tackling what I call confidence challenge, right? And a confidence challenge is something that's blocking your way, right? Again, I want to go for a job, I want to get a raise, I want to change jobs, I want to become an entrepreneur, I want to marry somebody, whatever it is, any decision in life. And subsequently, the reason that you're blocked is you're fearing something. Your
Mm,
amygdala is telling you there's something that's not right. And the something that's not right could be conflicting with your values. You know, there's something that just is going to make me really uncomfortable in a way that I can't live with myself. Or it's just telling you, hey, you're not ready. But until you really have that conversation, so to speak, with the amygdala and figure out what's worrying you, then you can't resolve it. And the worry comes down to, and we call it the 3 fears, the 3 emotional fears, comes down to 3 things. And it's only one of these 3 things. You're either afraid that you're going to fail, right? I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to feel badly. Nobody's going to like me, whatever. The second one is fear of regret. If I do this, I'm going to regret it later. I should have done it. Or if I don't do it, I'm going to regret that I didn't do it. So that fear of like making a bad decision, maybe a flavor of failure, really. But the mother of all fears is fear of rejection.
Mm.
And if I do whatever it is, any of those scenarios I threw out, I have, 4,000 scenarios that we use in our classes, but it could be anything. And it really is the mother because if you think about regret and failure, they are flavors of rejection. If I do this and I'm not successful and I don't get what I want or I don't get to the next level, people are going then they're going to accept me. They're not going to like me. I'm not going to like myself. So that fear of rejection and back to Abraham Maslow, 1940s, pyramid of needs and all that, that lack of belonging, that's the key. And unfortunately, people don't recognize that as clearly as you can. And when you say, okay, that's the problem, then you can fix it, right? I always say to people, classic example, Jordan, people say, I'm afraid of giving a presentation. Not me, Alyssa, but people fear of giving a presentation. It's a wide known fact. So I said, the solution's really easy. Don't present. Like, don't do it. Problem gone. Oh, no, 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 no. I have to give this presentation. I was like, why do you have to? Well, if I don't do this, I'm not going to, my boss is not going to promote me. My boss is not going to like me. There are all these real fears. And those are the fears that once you say, okay, let's look at that fear. First, is it true? Is it rational? And if you're not sure, how can you figure that out? How can you find out if it's even true or what you could do to mitigate it? Practicing a presentation, great, but maybe you need to think about if you're afraid that you're going to fail, how do we prevent you from failing? Right? That's a different issue than I'm scared of presenting.
Can you prevent failure though? Like, what if we changed our mindset on what failure actually means? I didn't fail, I learned.
No,
And I
keep
do.
going.
Well,
You're on the trail, right? Like what is failure?
do you ever really fail, or do you just learn along the way? You know?
Well, yes and yes, right? Yes and yes, because failure can really hurt, right? Like you fail to do something, get into a college or whatever it might be that's really important to you. And you're like, dang. And you may not have a second opportunity, right?
Sure, yeah.
But you're right. If you look at failure as either a learning experience or a redirect, like maybe you weren't supposed to go to that college. Maybe there's another one that's better for you. Maybe the timing wasn't right. Whatever. I know but it's hard in that moment,
Absolutely.
right? Now, looking back, you get a little older and you look back and you go, wow, I'm so glad I failed that time because it really took me in a different path, right? But you don't see that at that moment. So it's hard.
No, absolutely. And I love how you say confidence is a skill, because let's look at how all skills are developed and cultivated. Through what? Through repetition, right? So if you have a baseline of, let's just say, 0 out of 10 confidence, right? If you want to cultivate that skill of having confidence, you first have to go out there and get rejected, or go out there and try your best and fall on your face. Learn, what's that saying? Learn fast or fail fast, right? You gather lessons along the way, you figure out what works, what doesn't work, and eventually, your confidence could be a 5. And you utilize the skills of what a 5, I don't know, master person would have, and eventually you work your way up into a 10, until where you can nail that presentation without being nervous, or you can talk to the opposite sex without being nervous, or whatever the case is
That's
for
right.
you in your life, you know?
Well, Edison has this great quote, and I'm sure I'm not gonna do justice to it verbatim, but it's something like he said that he didn't discover the light bulb, he just figured 10,000 other ways that it didn't work, right?
Right. Yeah, I like
So,
that.
I think there's something to be said for that. One of the examples I give, if you follow Tiger Woods' career, it certainly wasn't a lack of practice or focus or determination, but as soon as his life and his values went sideways when he was philandering and all that, his golf game went to poop, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, it's one of those you have to tell yourself, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be the best. But if I want to go in that direction, if I want to make these decisions, if I want to accomplish whatever it is, I got to at least try, right? You can't win the lottery unless you play the lottery. So, give it a go. In the worst case, what's the worst case that can happen? Yeah, maybe I don't get it the first time, but maybe I'll also learn a lot more about myself and how to do it better next time.
Absolutely, and that's where, like, the positive feedback loops comes into play. It's like, okay, I was super nervous to do this thing. I did the thing. I failed horribly, but I'm proud of myself because I did the thing, you know? And I think that positive self-talk will encourage us to try harder things, or to try newer things, right?
Yeah.
Or new things in general, you know? But I think it starts with that positive self-talk. that internal dialogue. Because if you go out there and you're super nervous, you try the thing, you fail horribly, and you're like, "Man, I suck. That was horrible. She laughed at me," or I got laughed out of the room for my presentation. Well, if you're talking to yourself like that, of course you're not going to want to try again. But if you reinforce positive behavior, I'm so proud of myself. I tried the thing. You're going to want to try that thing again, and that over time, you can really cultivate a lot of confidence, I believe.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm also going to give people permission to bow out. So if you really like all of a sudden in a situation where you're like, I really don't want to do this, and I've been in that situation. Do you want to
Uh,
go on that loop de loo roller coaster? No. Can I? Sure. Do I want to? No, I'm not interested. But you give yourself that permission to also make a confident decision that you don't want to do something. That's okay too. And that's what I mean. Presenting something like, people say, I've done TED Talks and stuff. I could never do a TED Talk. I'm like, then don't. But if you really want to do one, yeah, you got to figure out how to overcome that negative Nelly in your head.
I like how you hold space for them. Maybe I'm just more aggressive, just my personality. But I think, as an example, I'm super fearful of presenting a TED Talk. And I think I heard this years ago, but because I have so much fear around this, that means I'm exactly where I need to be. And that's a massive opportunity for me to grow. The more fear I have about something, obviously, if it's not life or death, right? The more fear I have about something, the bigger the opportunity for me to grow as a person. And I thought that was a super spiritual insight that I recently learned. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, well, it's a big fun. I think I don't know if I 100% agree. I think
Yep.
that small wins, which is a lot of what we preach to, it's used by a lot of athletes it's been used for decades, can be just as effective, right? If you're celebrating even the small things that you're accomplishing in a day, and I say accomplishing doesn't have to be an accomplishment. It could be, you know what? I got up today with only one snooze. That was a big deal. That's awesome, right? Or I got through today and I didn't have any people get on my nerves. Okay, that's a small win. So, you know what? If you start to recognize the things that are important, but yet maybe not monumental, that also builds confidence. I think, if you're scared of like a TED Talk, maybe you have a map that you say, all right, in the next 6 months, I'm going to do these 3 presentations. And as I get bigger and bigger and bigger, my ultimate goal is to have a TED Talk. But as you're getting there, I want you to celebrate all those milestones because that's what's going to feed you the endorphin in your brain to go, that felt good. I'm going to do the next one. Right. Because if you don't do that, you're like, yeah, it was okay, but it's not a TED Talk. Sorry. That was part of the plan. We're getting there. We did a good job today. Next time, I'm going to do this a little different, a little bit better. But you know what? I'm on my way. I'm in the right
Yes.
path.
No, 100%. And I love how you said it's the mini wins, right? I call this like stacking wins, one might say. It's like I woke up on time today. I had the breakfast I was supposed to eat. I read my book. I meditated. Before 7 a.m., I already stacked 5 wins, right? And if you obviously win the day, okay, you have confidence about yourself. You have momentum. You win the week. You're feeling good. You're feeling proud. You win the month. And obviously, like the momentum keeps going. But it starts with the very beginning of stacking the first win of just getting up on time, as an example. And if you do fall off the wagon, Lord knows I do it probably all the time, show a little self-compassion for yourself.
Yes, for sure.
Negative self-talk, negative internal dialogue is never going to pull you or push you towards your goals. I do
Right.
want to say that.
Alongside with that, 100% and everything. It's self-compassion to be like kind of almost humorous, like, oh shit, man, that was not my best day, right? But it's also being really honest with other people. Like if you're a really great leader, you don't pretend that you're perfect because that doesn't help
Mm-mm.
other people do the same thing, give it a try and fail, right? So when you fail, be like, man, I've said to my own children, what I said was not good. I'm sorry, that was not my best. And what I would rather have said, and I'm sorry I didn't say it the first time, is right. I mean, that's compassion for yourself, but it's really compassion for other people to understand that if you pretend to be perfect all the time and don't admit that you're able to fail, don't expect other people to be comfortable failing either.
I almost lose respect for someone when they pretend to be perfect, when they pretend, or I guess when they act overconfident. It's like you're a human, just like, me. And there's no way you could pretend to know everything all the time or act so flawless every moment. So for me personally, I immediately just like lose respect for that person. And if they're my leader, who knows how long I'm gonna follow them, if that makes sense, you know what I mean?
I do.
But I do wanna ask this one question. So you've reached over 1,000,000 people worldwide through keynotes and workshops. What's one transformational story that still sticks with you and why?
Well, you know what? Interestingly enough, sometimes I get emails or LinkedIn messages from people who've listened to either the TED Talks or maybe read a blog post or something. And, after a talk, after I do a live presentation, people come up, they're hugging, they're crying, they're thankful, right? All that. Because I tell the story in a little bit more depth about my son and his situation. A lot of people have children or relatives that are gone through a similar thing, and they're very grateful for that, and that also really is so important to me. But it's the ones that just said, my whole life I assumed I just was never gonna be confident, and starting today. And I get that a lot because I'm giving permission, so to speak, for them to be like, "Let's get it. Let's do it." Right? Somewhere along the line, and, that's the other schools of thought I referred to before. I wanna unpack all the trauma and all that, and fine, but that's not the s I practice positive psychology, which says, "We're here today. Where do we wanna go next?" And to get to next, you have to allow yourself to go to next, right? So part of that's just unlocking that opportunity for people to say, "I can if you can do it, I can do it." Right? I mean, like you said, everybody's human. Confidence isn't something that somebody was gifted. It's something that they figured out, and if somebody else figured it out, so can you.
I'm a very spiritual person, and I'm reading this book called The Master Key System right now, and it kind of correlates with what we talked about earlier. But if you are a financial advisor, the only way to create more wealth is to use the wealth you currently possess. The only way to grow your physical muscles is to use the physical strength you already have. The only way to build confidence and to build courage is to use the confidence and courage you already have. And I think if we really take a step back, like maybe this is like universal laws or karma, one might say, but whatever I give always somehow finds a way to return to me, right? So if I'm a leader, okay, and I'm trying to instill confidence into my staff or into my employees, I would want to encourage them and build their confidence up. I would give away love or give confidence away so they can feel confident internally and go out and make something happen. Now, from your perspective, am I crazy for that? Or what are your thoughts there?
Every talk, including my TED Talks, I end with the greatest way to get more confidence is to give it away. The reason
Hmm.
I say that is kind of a little bit different than the way you phrase it, because I agree with what you said. My take is, if I have a superpower to give you confidence, man, that's awesome. So why should I be falutin? Why should I, walk around as if I'm the boss? I can only be respected. I can only be a legend if I give confidence to other people around me who then call me that.
Mm,
Right? And I mean that because that's the gift. That's the secret, is to give other people confidence, and knowing you have the power to do that as a human. The day people realize that as leaders, that's the change, that's the transformation. But it doesn't come from yelling at people. It doesn't come from berating them or belittling them. It comes from empowering their sense of controlling their amygdalas, giving them agency to make decisions based on what they think is right for them. And so that's a skill you have to learn as a leader. That's not something that I think is necessarily taught or intuitive,
mm.
but it's really easy.
No, for sure. And I feel like, at least personally speaking, when I find myself building confidence in others, it makes me feel good internally, which is super weird.
I mean, it's funny, like my kids, I have 2 boys, right? And they're not kids anymore, they're actually adults, but, superheroes and then some in my house might for the last 30 years, right? And no matter what the superpower is, what right? The famous question, if you had a superpower, what would it be? But no matter what their superpower really is, what do all superheroes have in common? When they show up, everybody else has confidence,
That is so true. I never thought about that.
right?
Alyssa, this was a great conversation. It was honestly a pleasure. Where can the people find you?
Easiest is americanconfidenceinstitute.com. My LinkedIn, of course, is there. I'm the one and only Alyssa Dver, Dver. So you can certainly find me there and connect. I'd love to hear from people anyway, anytime. But reach out, comments, questions, please do.
Awesome. Again, thanks for joining us, audience. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys next time.